After an extended break, Overrated, episode 14. Freshly come back from a vacation. I was in Barcelona for a week, and then some, circumstances around it. It's mainly bad internet. Forced us into a longer break. But we're back to talk about basically everything with a nice umbrella term, right? Looking for Overwatch League Tier 1, by the way.
Yep.
I guess that was a dominating topic of the recent times, right?
It still is.
Definitely, and
It still is. I think it's the most dominating topic right now because even contenders have lost their value, with all these bans and players backstabbing others just to get more exposure and stuff like that. So
I mean, it's like some of them aren't even doing it willingly. It's just paste bins listed. I don't even understand. How is that mechanic? Like, how does that work? It's like, okay, one of us saved that specific conversation and put it on pastebin, and then for whatever reason, if my house burns down and I don't have my local hard drive where I can it makes even less sense because it's not even saved locally. You can access fucking Discord servers from everywhere. I don't understand. Like, I really don't understand how that is even imaginable that these things leak.
These millennials, I tell ya, these millennials have no idea.
Unless they want to, right? For whatever reason. I guess some were willingly, but anyway, I guess it would make sense to start with Contenders, and oh boy, I mean, I don't think anyone saw what we were seeing in both EU and NA. Nobody predicted that, right? In fact, if we're looking at the the predictions we had for Contenders on the Wenceslab side, I guess we could start with EU because I look better there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think EU played eventually, a bit more according to what we predicted, although for not the reasons we predicted, right? You see that we have Misfits, we have Cloud9, 1, 2, 3, most of us, so we have like the triad of the top 4 teams. You managed to get to sneak in there, Giganti, in the 4th place.
Yeah. I mean, Smack with bazooka puppies. How did that turn out? Oh boy. Oh, that aged well.
So, anyways, yeah, I mean, this kind of, this side of the Atlantic actually played out a bit more as to what we predicted. I think Giganti was obviously an outstanding contender, and then we had, the fall of United and them replaced by Giganti. But on the other side, for NA, things were a lot more crazy, right? Even till the bitter end, and you can see it because like from week 5 to week 6 we didn't have that much standings changes in the EU side of things, but on the NA things, like even Immortals by winning against Kugarna in the final week, they placed 6th and Kugarna placed 7th, right? So it was a crazy roller coaster altogether.
I think for instance, this was the way we predicted was a good idea how the power levels had to be before before the competition started, or what you would have to have expected for these tournaments to turn out. And then obviously for certain reasons some things just broke apart, right? It's like the one thing I think nobody thought was, or probably didn't think it would be this severe, is how rosters fell apart, right? Or how much would be changed, or that Contenders would actually again be a testing ground, but this time not necessarily only for Blizzard, but also for the teams in many ways, right?
And again, it's like not even for the teams, because the teams, most of the teams actually will not, continue to Overwatch League. They will not participate in Overwatch League. So it's not like they were testing the changes to be permanent in a future rosters. It was like, we're testing the changes so that we have a chance as a team to move to the playoffs and get obviously a part of the prize money. and at the same time to get more exposure. That was basically it. It wasn't
Mhm.
really even like we're trying to figure out a very strong core or a very strong roster that will continue further, like it was the case, in Overwatch Winter Premiere or other tournaments in the past that had some kind of, this kind of substitutes coming in the middle of the tournament, right?
Mhm.
If you remember, I think Immortals dominated. Or not actually, they didn't dominate actually, but uh, they were formed like this. This roster, the complexity roster formed, a bit more during that tournament. Then it fell apart altogether. But anyways, it was like this was a testing ground that it allowed for teams to form their rosters. And this time around, it's not even that. It's like we're forming rosters just to have a chance for more exposure to go to the playoffs and get to be on the stage where all the spotlights will be on us. And then we just go our separate ways. Like everyone on every team is basically trialing for teams that are not even like Optic, for example, or
Mhm.
teams like the Overcraft team or stuff like that, that they
Mhm.
don't have even a presence in the Overwatch scene altogether. So
Yeah.
and you know what's the pinnacle of it? Like Sinatra basically coming in that week's the second win against In United, single-handedly, almost like, giving the win to Cloud9.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and then
And then just in many ways it was a tournament of mercenaries, temporary mercenaries, in just to see if stuff works out. We could have seen Shurfor on phase. At least he was a stand-in there. I mean, no rosters other than the actual top ones were rigid. There was this one league where Bazooka Puppies had Nesh, and then they looked sort of, they could maybe, beat at least the lower level EU teams. But then next week he's gone again, and it's like it was just insanely hard to predict these things. And like someone that would have predicted all these things would probably have to be an expert in just behind the scenes politics more than
yeah.
gameplay, right? It's just like if we're looking also, I mean, NA, the Immortals downfall still makes no sense to me. Like, so
It makes sense in a bit in a way, but not in the way that you would expect, right?
okay,
Because before that, before the tournament, they were talking about the American side of things. Verbo, Grim Reality, and Agility is learning Korean, right? So you were expecting that all this team is working towards a common goal, that everyone is like actually getting better together than
mm-hmm.
they were in season 0, where they dominated. But it seemed like during after week 3, especially, that it was the crucial week for them, that Verbo, the guy who was behind their success for such a long time, with shot calling and everyone,
Mm-hmm.
he was like uh, not in the game, or not in coordination with everyone else. It was like,
I think
I
they
don't know what
talked about
happened
that
there.
they actually took the shot calling away from him because they thought that this would ultimately lead them to be a stronger team. And I think in many ways, if that actually turns out to be the case, then if you're an Overwatch League roster, I think that actually makes sense to, make the necessary changes for contenders, even though you will gimp yourself in many ways, and then to eventually be stronger. I just question if that wouldn't happen within 6 weeks of competition. You would have thought that, we would see Immortals. If that is a move that ends up being, better for the roster, you would expect them after 6 weeks to be at least equal to the level where they started from when Bobo was still calling, right?
Yeah, but do you take away the shot calling from the Lucio player to give it to the Korean tank player? I mean,
Yeah.
what happens when the meta changes to a Reinhardt meta? Like, for example, what's going to call, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
he's supposed to hold the shield and do very limited movements and
Yeah.
be coordinated with his team, whereas Lucio, no matter what happens, because of his mobility and stuff, like survivability and all these things, he will always be able to reposition himself to get information or stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. So I don't know. Like, and again, like we know from the Rogue example that they had two shot callers. They were coordinating two teams within the same team. One with the backline and around wins, that also had some kind of general shot calling, and then there was like the other group of the flankers, with Nico, Sun, and Nox. So
Yeah.
why didn't they go for such a coordination level?
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyways,
The strangest thing about Immortals was for me that if Fate takes over the shot calling, he always looked like the guy that was out of place. Like his performance dropped off a cliff the most because his engagements weren't followed up, right?
he was giving the example, Whisker. Follow me, guys.
Yeah.
First off the cliff.
It's yeah, like lemmings. It's
he's like those Japanese movies where he has the katana and he just rushes to the enemy with guns and Gatling guns, and he's instantly dying in 0.5 seconds.
nice.
That was him in the first 4 weeks of Contenders, basically,
Yeah.
or at least in the first two. Let's not exaggerate. In
Yeah.
the first two, it was like
And
that.
before that, he was actually a Mano-esque Winston that got a lot of kills from his team, right? So they were a tank-heavy team, if I remember the PTK model, and that just completely didn't work out for them anymore based on the shot calling change. And obviously, we can't forget the amount of patch changes that Contenders suffered from was also insane for 6 weeks, right? I think we had... I mean, it's not just the patches that Contenders is actually played on, but also the ones that are played on live. So players can't, practice in solo queue and whatever. So we're once again not playing on the live patch, also not the offline finals, as was released by OverGG, right? It's a roller coaster in many ways.
It's kind of weird, yeah. It's kind of weird because sometimes some of the teams you're going to scream, or if you don't want to go for the usual patterns, for the usual suspects in crime, all these things, because like the people that have access to the to the tournament realm are only the players that play in Contenders. So you can only scream, against other teams that play in Contenders. And if you don't want to leak, stats and stuff like that, you're going to go and test some things with other people. You can't do it, right? You don't have this possibility because no one else has access to this tournament realm, to this patch that is not live. So yeah, but that's why it's still a testing ground, right? And we all thought like, okay, we got into this, like it's Contender season 1, it's the top 8 teams from each region. At the end of the group stage, we will have like the rankings. And at the same time, what I would like, what I hoped for was like we also have like the best stat comparisons, right? Everyone will have played everyone else in this tournament, and therefore it would be like the best stats collection you would have to test, like to say this guy is better than this guy, or this team is better than this team. And for example, you can look at some statistics we have, with in accordance to the standings, right? Like we know right now which are the top 4 teams. If we look at their numbers, for example, some of these teams have problems because of all the factors that played a part in this season 1, like the roster changes, stuff like that. So for example, if you look at the European side of things.
Okay, European, yeah.
Yeah,
got it.
Okay, so if you look about the European side of things, like the top 4 teams are Misfits, Team Giganti, 1, 2, 3, and then Cloud9. But if you look, for example, at things like how many win rate, how many fights they have won on average, right? So you can see that the top 4 teams are not like, the fourth one is not Cloud9, is a Gamers Origin. So like stats wise, Gamers Origin had a much better game than Cloud9. Like, and again, Cloud9 had those, I think that first week, if I remember correctly, where they were destroyed by, I don't remember which team. I think it was Giganti. They played first, so they were destroyed, and then they formed the roster. The next week they had Atra, and the week after that they had Mickey A. So it's not like you're having the same players and the same quality of players that go against the other teams. So their stats are kind of skewed in that sense. But again, it just shows that Gamers Origin had a much better overall game, and it was the only team that managed to get 2 maps of Misfits basically.
Yes.
No other team managed to do such a feat, and yeah, it was done because of the Doomfist patch being played on, and then because like they had this kind of broken mechanism with the hitbox of the fist that they were exploiting, partially exploiting, because if it's in the game, you should be playing to your strength. But again, it shows this kind of things. And when you look over at NA things, this is where the contrast is even more interesting and you know and bright, because Envision basically and yeah, Envision is even lower. Like
Yeah.
you see here that in terms of of fights won on average, they're below Immortals, they're below Rogue, obviously FNRG, FE. And this is where basically it shows that if you're lucky in this format, like getting the wins and clutching it out in against opponents that you shouldn't actually expect to win, like for example getting Rogue first, then you're getting like these small windows of success. And Envision it was one such team. So going forward into the playoffs, if you look at these statistics, basically, you know, with first blood, with the win after they get a first death for them, because that's also an interesting stat, like how able are they to recover from losing a player early on and to win the engagement. So if you look at these things, you know that going into the playoffs, as Envision is likely, you know, to go like either third or fourth, like depending on who they play. They're not expected to win the whole thing. But but again, it's like let me finish this. It's like they're playing a single elimination, I think, finals. There's no double elimination bracket. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. So all you need is just one win to get to the finals. So if they play FNRG FE and they manage somehow to upset FNRG FE, which is I think the opponent they can tackle right now, but I'm not sure if they
don't think they will see it that way. I think they will have to either play FaZe or Envy, and it's
okay. Then it will then it will show that these statistics they have right now, they need to step up, right? They need to overperform from their 6 weeks like performance so far.
Yeah. I mean, in many ways, also, if we go back to EU Gamers Origin, that particular format favors those that efficiently get their wins, right? Their map wins. So if you you know win a lot of 3-2s, close 3-2s in maps, and you obviously have a pretty high fight win percentage and in general win percentage, but it doesn't count as much because the first metric of standing is how many games have you won, and only after that you get to the maps, right? So I guess we could look at the standings for Europe. We basically see exactly that, right? Gamers Origin has won 2 more maps than Cloud9, but it doesn't matter, right? Because they lost one more map. And keep in mind, those 2 maps are like the ones against Misfits, right?
Yeah.
So those are pretty damn impressive, but they don't count for anything, sadly.
Yeah.
Right? Other than the glory of having done it.
Yeah, they didn't clutch out. They didn't clutch it when they were supposed to, right? It doesn't really matter. That's an interesting thing. Like with Envision as well. Like they're the third team, but they're like the worst third team in terms of fights. But they managed to get the wins they needed. Like it doesn't really matter in the end. But I think it will matter when you go against like only the top opposition in the tournament, where everyone is going to step up their game. You know, where everyone is going to be even better. It's also LAN. So FaZe Clan, Envious, even the FNRG FE roster, all of them have LAN experience, right? Envision, they don't have LAN experience. So
only very few of them. So if I look at the roster, I know that Saini, so I'm gonna take over 1.
Yeah, Saini maybe. Yeah.
I don't know the others from other games maybe, but Numlocked obviously has some from the TF2 days and also for the creation days. I'm not sure about the others.
It also played in Overwatch Open. He was playing with Splice, was it?
Who?
And NRG. Numlock has played with NRG. Has played with other teams as well.
Also has recently posted an owl emoticon on Twitter. So, I mean,
I don't know. Like these owls have become a very favorite pet for many people in the scene right now.
It gets increasingly interesting like some of those names suggest to me that rosters have to be bigger than I initially anticipated. Or maybe I'm just severely misjudging some of those players, because they are borderline tier 2 players that post OWL emoticons at the moment. So when there's still
two players,
pretty good Chinese teams up for grabs, and probably, let's say, like a GC Busan or something, right? If these players are getting like spots in OWL, I think that just means that rosters are bigger than just, 8-man for on average, I would think.
the league allows for up to 12
Yes.
members for a team, and I think every team should sign 12 members, because it's going to be like 8 months, right? You never know what happens in such a long such a long duration, like accidents, injuries, illnesses, or stuff like that. Like, and the thing is, again, that you can't really bring someone else from the outside to cover your role, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that. It's not like, like the CSGO tournament, you go to ECL Cologne or some other tournament, suddenly a player of yours is not feeling well. Okay, we're bringing in someone else to sub in for him. It's not going to work like that. You have to have these players signed. You have to pay them salaries. You have to, have to give them benefits. So many things.
At
You're
the
not
same
even
time,
getting up the chance.
if you think about it, right, the difference between an 8-man and a 12-man roster is at least $200,000 a year, right? That's not that much if you pay 20 million for a spot.
Nope, it's
so,
not.
like, in that sense, you should do it. And obviously, what's also very interesting, some of those changes, and I've actually heard it through the grapevine, we're staying with this, and I don't think many know this. You can switch every single map. You can switch players, also in Contenders, and it's very likely this will also stay for Overwatch League.
For Contenders, they didn't really say anything about how many times you can swap. So yeah, maybe you can swap players, but like, I think only one team, only Renegades have swapped a player in a game.
Yes.
Mid-game. I think it was Jesus that went, that was subbed in by Corey, that was subbed out for Corey. So, and again, that's the interesting thing. Like, you're allowed this kind of adaptation to your game, and you know that teams like, Gigandi or teams like Cloud9, they do these things. They swap their rosters. So why don't you do it yourself? Like, why don't you spice things up with your own things? So yeah, I was expecting to see a lot more of that if one team was to do it, but for some reason, and maybe it has to do with how the orgs are run right now, where it's like United, for example. Let's say you need another 2 players to come and sub in for your roster. They have to be signed to United, and it depends if United wants them signed or stuff. Like, I don't like how the process is.
There's definitely some contract issues with that. Also in general, just the entire contract situation obviously screwed over a couple of players that have been quite vocal as such. Shofor, him having, I mean, it's assumed he has a pretty big buyout clause and therefore is not that attractive to certain OWL orgs, right? That kind of sucks for these people, and I think in many ways, even though Contenders was fairly dynamic, if those weren't in place, it might have been even worse, right? So,
coin flip wins.
I mean, the worst part about all of this was basically the desk, right? The analysis desk, always hovering around 50%, like basically coin flipping whoever wins the follow-up match, right? Funny enough, like, for the longest time, I think in our aggregate prediction game, just based on tendency, now Sideshow is the one that predicted the winner the most. He just didn't follow his own thoughts when he was sitting at the desk and always going like, yeah, I'm going
I noticed it, and it was like he was betting things on the website, on the Wizards Lab prediction thread, and then he was betting on the other things. Like I think
Yeah.
it's the thing with where you are in a group of people, they influence you a lot. Like
Mm-hmm.
they tell you things that you're starting
Yeah.
uh basically yeah, doubting your own self. Like how
Exactly.
did I miss that? Like how? And like reinforce will probably tell him like if they have the better tanks, like how can you win against them? Like and then they get smashed that way, right?
I think it's just, you know, your opinion sort of gets the same if you jump out of an airplane with people, right? So it's, I mean, Sideshow had the chance to look mad smart, which he did for the most part. I think he had the most outstanding analysis work for me
Yep.
at the desk. Both, he never really, you know, made stats look bad or used them in ways where we cringe, you know, over, or most of the stuff he had to say was always fairly sensical. And then obviously, if he actually stuck to his guns, he would have just stomped everyone in that predictions game too. So I really hope he's the next, you know, one posting owl emoticons on Twitter, because that
I
would be a real shame if that wasn't
Yeah,
to be the case.
I don't know about that. Like, I don't know how the talent for all will be chosen. And at the same time, I don't know. Like, I mean, for season one, it's going to be pretty easy because it's going to be in one location, so it can be casted by the same people. Just week after
Mm-hmm.
week. Like that's employees going to the same place. Like whatever Monty Doa did in Apex, right? Each week, one day, you go there, you show up, you cast the games. That's your up. When you move to season two, however, where you have like these home and away games, if it's in season two, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
that's a huge leap, right? With all
Mm-hmm.
the logistics and the travels and the visas and all this stuff, like going around, moving around so many people. If it works like that in season two, then you expect to have like different broadcasts going on, maybe at the same time, maybe at different times, depending on how the games are, played during a day or stuff like that. So yeah, maybe then we can see like Sideshow and Bren in covering the, I don't know, like the East Coast games, and then we have like another pair covering
Mm-hmm.
the West Coast games, and then you have like the Chinese people over at China covering the Chinese games, or you can have like a duo of English casters casting also the Chinese games
Mm-hmm.
for the other audience, because it's like when the American teams are going to play against the Chinese teams, you need to have both right sides of broadcast going on at the same time, like Chinese and English. So maybe then you expand the pool of talent and casters and stuff like that. But for the first season, I mean, it's going to be very limited in this area.
That's actually a
So
very
I
good
don't know.
question. Do you just, in season one, do you just constantly like run 4 different language streams, all, you know, quality checked for OWL standards? That's a logistical issue, right? Because I'm sure, like, if Overwatch League wants to be a global league, they have to have like 100% casted in Korean too. Even the, you know, LA team games, right? For season one, wouldn't they have to?
That's very interesting, isn't it? And who is going to suffer in order to watch the games and stay up late?
Oh boy.
I mean, I have already messed up my schedule every weekend because it goes way late for Europe.
Yes.
So,
I mean,
and
this won't change with season one. This would probably
yeah,
get
I
worse.
think
I just hope that they only have weekend games, so you actually have, you know, reasonable time frames. Because even I'm old man, okay? So if a game starts at 3 o'clock, even on a Friday, like it feels wasted to me to not be outside with friends or in my bed sleeping. So my day after that is just completely wrecked based on that, right? And
and
then
watch it tomorrow,
yeah,
the next.
I don't feel like jet lagging myself the entire next week to watch Overwatch League or, you know, Overwatch League games. It's just I'll I mean I will probably then just catch the bots, but I realize that's a fraction of the viewer base that actually does that. You know, these are all questions. I realize that in many ways, if we were to, you know, trust all these Chinese numbers, you have to broadcast at Chinese times, right? It's like no way they are real.
Outsourcing viewership to China.
I mean, they are bullshitting numbers like nobody's business. It's like China 35.5 million, rest of the world 500,000. Okay, okay, yeah, definitely that's how it works.
Yeah, but again, I mean, even if you get viewers, for example, that's only for advertisement that it really matters in a sense. Like, I mean, in engagement, you know, you want a region to be against like America, you have to broadcast it in American times. Anyways, I think we will see lots of things change over the course of next year, where the first season will be underway,
Mm-hmm.
because Blizzard at least has shown that, yeah, season one won't start in the third quarter of 2017 as they were hyping us about,
Mm-hmm.
but it will start like in the first quarter of 2018. So it's like that's just 1 quarter, you know, difference. So it's not that big of a deal in the end. But um, the landscape of Overwatch, it's going to be really interesting going into season one, because except for Koreans, where you know they're signed a mass, basically they're signed the whole roster into one team, so that's good. No drama there. The Europeans and the Americans and all the others competing for those spots in the other teams, and the backstabbing we see just now, you know, with all these things, it's going to be even more juicy, like going towards the Overwatch League and when we announce the rosters, because for some people that's like that they want to do their career, right? You have to keep playing for Contenders. That's the alternative if you're not into Overwatch League. And for people who are up and coming as players, they have to stick to Open Division. That's one match per week, and then Contenders, right? Which again is like really limited, you know, amount of playtime of official playtime compared to what was happening before that. Like, you remember you had like Alienware monthly melees every month, and then you had like another 2 or 3 tournaments at the same time ongoing, so that you had like so many chances for people to get as much time, official time, basically going up after prizes, because it's very different to play for $10 like per week in Open
Mm-hmm.
Division than to play for $100,000 prize pool, right?
Yes.
And it's a completely different, like the level of concentration you have and the effort you put into to
Mm-hmm.
get that money into to make sure you make a name for yourself into this competition. So I don't know, like this will be the critical point where either it will flourish and everything, you know, will be going well and will just go better from that point onwards, or
Mm-hmm.
it will start, you know, to crumble a bit, like it will lose some player, some portion of the player base, and I don't know, like it's going to be interesting altogether though for us. We're on the outside of things, just looking in,
Definitely, yeah.
the players struggling.
I mean,
Popcorn.
one thing that obviously I thought was quite a good way how Contenders functioned was obviously that some teams just exceeded all expectations, right? So, for instance, a team like Envision that bought their spot, like people wanted them to play against LG Evil to get that last spot. In the end, they just bought it for under 12K, right? And then for them to, you know, really explode into the scene, and now that we know, for instance, someone like Numlocked that even got onto the team later, like these players are now receiving Overwatch League invites. There's no way without that performance that they would have even been in the conversation, right? So
True.
that's an organization that I hope the organization actually gets something from that, you know, like some buyout cash for their investment in that team, for their investment in that opportunity for Contenders. But yeah, definitely that's like, you know, a part where, okay, there's some complacency in these teams that are already in Overwatch League, or where the players know they aren't going to be going to be going in a unifying situation. But I think a lot of drive for Envision came just from the, okay, if we don't take this opportunity now, this big thing might actually start without us. And that's why a lot of motivation came to these lower level teams. And I think that it might also have been true for Gamers Origin, and it almost worked out for them too, right? They were pretty close to making it. And obviously, like, someone like Leaf will probably be looked at in many ways, wouldn't we?
Yeah. Gamers Origin were basically riding the wave of the Doomfist patch, right? It showed, like, and I think I like the fact that they tried to stick with it even after the change, but it didn't work to that success that it was working beforehand, right? Whereas, for example, in Vision, they swapped some things, like Jar wasn't playing as much Doomfist afterwards. Anyways, I think that it's really important for teams to get to right now and players to get as much exposure as possible, because this is the best way to really show your strength, right? And a prime example of that is that Rogue, for example, they had a very dominant year all around, with just a few slips here and there, the Apex slip, and this is the second slip this year. Yes. But everyone right now like has them as the worst team ever, or unworthy of their success so far. And until the game against the Envious, where they showed that, when we're focused, when we're concentrated, when we're playing with optimal setup.
Yes.
Because one of the factors that people do not understand about Rogue is that they're too execution-heavy team, right?
Yes.
They work small details, on the audio cues, stuff like that, to take the upper hand in engagement and stuff, and to win against teams. So when you upset this kind of perfection they have in their game, and for me that's like the Achilles their Achilles thingy. I don't remember the word in English. So if you take this kind of setup and in their play from them, they crumble quite fast. And I think this is something they should have worked for, like when they had Sun on Junkrat, for example, where Junkrat doesn't really rely on accuracy or pinpoint movement and stuff like that, like Tracer does. Yeah, they were showing like signs of life, signs of comeback, and then even against the Envious, for example. So if they had worked towards this kind of play style where it's not really execution heavy, we're just exploiting some stuff in the meta and trying to get the win anyway, right? Then I think the opinion that people would have would be completely different right now. And it was a conscious choice for them. They paid the price because I mean it is their choice that they chose to play they choose to play like this. But in the end, it's small details that make the difference right now. And you see in Vision, they took the spot. I think Kungana, I don't think Kungana also had an offer to be bought. The spot to be bought by another organization. Maybe this was the NRG info you had, like trying to buy and spot into the Overwatch League.
I mean, not impossible, right?
It could be. Yeah, I mean, they maybe didn't want to get the Team Liquid spot because Team Liquid would just farm them, goals, just give you the money just to get the spot.
Yeah.
So
they would have tried to, right? So
I don't know. Yeah. I'm just speculating right now. So small details make like the big difference here in this season 1.
The thing is about Rogue is, from the outside, it looks like they're playing a dangerous game. Because, okay, so this is what we currently presume to be the case. We haven't heard any announcement that Rogue is going to be picked up. We assumed Rogue would be one of the teams in the Overwatch League, with their backing from Steve Aoki, and he would have probably fixed some other investors, right? That didn't happen. Then we have had no announcement of them joining any team. The channels are fairly quiet. What we do expect them is they want to go as a unit. They have tried to look as a unit for all of Contenders. Remember when Vince was at QuakeCon, they explicitly, there was no doubt that Colsey was ever going to ever again play on that roster, because that would sort of promote this idea of, you know, breaking up the Magic Six, which they don't want to happen. They want to go into Overwatch League as a unity, and that's why, you know, showcasing that they're still winning with subs would go against that. And I really hope that poker plays off, because I do believe what you're saying about the execution heavy style. I think pound for pound, they are still very, very close to envious in terms of player skill. Nox is just still, like, he's, I think, statistically the best Winston. Obviously, you know, that doesn't say that much. It does say much if your team is not the best in the league, right? Like, if your team didn't even make top 4 and you're still statistically the best Winston in the tournament, boy, that, like, he's doing work, right? Then obviously we don't have to talk about the proficiencies of AKM or Soon when they're on. Like, Soon, how is Soon suddenly fucking god like Junkrat? What's going on, man? Like, that makes no sense. His entire life, he just, or his entire career, he just played hit scans, and then he had some support play at the very beginning of it. Like, he hasn't touched a projectile, and suddenly he's the sickest Junkrat. What's going on? Doesn't make sense.
I think he's touched. I mean, at least on the, you know, on the ranked level, on the ranked gameplay, he has played many heroes. I think he's very proficient. It's again a choice, a conscious choice made by the team that we're going to have you on Tracer and to make the most of it. And again, if you remember Numbani against Envious, like the execution going into the first point, for example, was very interesting, because they waited, you know, they were just, you know, arranging the positions, and then they go in and just storm the place, right? That's like top level Overwatch right there. You wait, you find where they positioned, the enemy team where it's positioned, you form a plan, you execute the plan, you get the point. And that is something that we haven't seen by many teams right now in Overwatch. It's most like scrappy engagements where you just go in and try to force your way, or you just play default setups and stuff like that. We haven't seen like slow-paced Overwatch where you form your execution in the corner, like just looking at them. You don't trust things, and even by teams like Misfits, for example, sometimes they just go in and just win on the back of Logix with his great aiming, his great pickoffs. And this is an interesting thing for me, that if you, for example, you put right now the top 4 teams in NA with the top 4 teams in EU and the top 4 teams in Korea, this would be the tournament to watch right now. This would show you exactly, you know, the levels between the teams, and if, like, you know, the Envision team can't really compete against the toughest opposition. Basically, the top 4 teams in EU, not really so much. Like Cloud9, I wouldn't really put them. Let's make it the top 3 or something like that. So yeah, there's like this season of Contenders has so many things to talk about. If you want to go into details, I have been analyzing each and every game, and I have been, you know, trying to find out these patterns of the teams, like what they're doing on certain maps, on certain occasions, like which composition they prefer to play, how much success they have with it, how likely is for them to bring it out in the next game that they're going to play this map and stuff like that. And this is what I missed from Contenders analyst desk, right? They were going in, you know, they were just telling about some stuff about the players, and they were dropping a player comparison that was just one fraction, like I don't know, like 5% of the whole picture. Just looking at the Genshin comparison, what's so great about the Genshin comparison, when you know the bigger picture, the compositions, like how much success this team had with the compositions, or even the map stats, like for example how much success they had on escort, on assault, on hybrid, for example, and how the game will play out. And then they go on and give us a prediction of 3-1, 4-0, and yeah, maybe they get it, maybe they don't, but analysis wise, like this is where in a team game you want to focus, like how the team as a whole operates and works against the other teams. I think that the best segments obviously are the ones where you're rolling the replay and you're just talking about positions and stuff like that. I think all 3 of them, I would give the edge to Sideshow. I think Sideshow is the best analyst in these things. He has been doing it for a lot of time. And I think I wouldn't give it to Reinforce, because Reinforce is a player, right?
Mm.
He hasn't really devoted so much time to see different play styles. Although he has, experience analyzing the play style of other teams,
Mm-hmm.
he analyzes the play style of teams that he usually plays against, right? He
Mm-hmm.
doesn't really get the whole picture to watching every single game. He also doesn't have the time. If you're on a team, you have to
Yes.
practice, and therefore you don't have the time.
Yeah.
So I think Sideshow is the best one to break down plays and really
Yes.
highlight things. Then comes Reinforce, and obviously the third one in line comes Silfrost, which as an analyst, it was his first time, I think, right
Mm-hmm.
now. All the previous times he was just a host,
Yes.
right? Not just the host, but he was the host, right?
Yeah.
So anyways, I think this was a kind of analysis I was really missing, and I was hoping to see Contenders, because each and every week, you had the analysis from all the previous weeks, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you had things to add. Each and every week you added something, added
Yes.
something, added something, and therefore you could even break it down by matches and see, like, okay, this team did really well against Misfits, for example. This team did really get away against, let's say, Misfits. Again, that's an exaggeration right now. This team didn't really do it against Misfits. So when you see when you have like this kind of same metric against a very tough opponent, right? Then, for example, you can talk about, like, in their match against the the top dog right now in the tournament, one of the teams did like horrible, and the other did pretty well. So I would favor the team that did really well against Misfits, for example. Like, this kind of all this knowledge passed around, that it was really missing. And I know they had like a schedule to adhere to. They
Yes.
didn't really have all the time in the world, but you can really have like just so great infographics
Mm-hmm.
that you don't even need to talk about. You can talk about other things and
Yes.
just have the infographic for like 1 minute. Everyone will see all the
Mm-hmm.
information you need. You have it with good hierarchy also, because it's not like people are going to just scan the screen and find the crucial information themselves. So you have a good hierarchy, and then you go in and talk about other things. Like what's happening in CS:GO right now. You see that they have like the map scores, then they go into player comparisons, but
Mm-hmm.
they present so many info, and they
Yeah.
don't even talk about this info. Like, maybe they will point at some point.
I think what's better about CS:GO is because the map pool is smaller, and then also teams get to ban. They just have a higher, amount of games played on each and every single map, which then makes it much more telling. In Contenders, like sometimes someone played two maps, the same map twice, and they went 1-1. Well, it's a
Yeah,
hard
that.
right information to get anything out of in many ways. And then obviously, one thing is, and I agree with you here, they definitely need to incorporate more, team analysis. At the same time, I think it's also, you sort of have to play to your audience in the sense that, Cult of Personality just brings the people to watch. Like, they want to see the best player. Like, it's not as much about the unity of a world-class roster as much as it is about the best players on that specific team, right? Even in sports, that's true, right? It's unfair, but most of the time that's how most people tick, right?
Well, you can do that as well. Like, it's not like you can do only one of the two,
Yes.
right? You can do comparisons, but again, you make the comparisons like, this is the star of this team going against the star of this team, and you showing information about why is the star of his team. Know why he's so great on Genji, for God's sake. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and it in that comparison where Michael had played 5 minutes, like, that's the thing, right? If you saw, for example, that his PTK on all heroes combined for this team is the highest, constantly, like game in and game out, he's the one that secures the most first kills and other stuff, like on the team level, like, and you compare it against to another player on the other team that also has like incredibly good stats, then it's not even a matter of if you compare the two players, but like, okay, this is the two players that have to show up. If they show up in their respective roles, then we have a game in our hands, right? If they don't show up, then one of them or their team is going to fail. But when you're talking about that small percentage, like, of their play style, which is like a Genji, which again, depending on the maps that you're going to play on, maybe they don't even bring out a Genji, right? So what is all this comparison about? Like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's again what you said about Overwatch being having so much diversity. When you have so many maps that have so many different strategies, and you don't analyze like why is Genji, for example, crucial for this team? Like how much time they have played Genji in general in this tournament, or which compositions they run. That Genji is a crucial component of them. Then we're missing a lot of information on
Yes.
what to, to understand and what to look at. Like we say Genji comparison. Okay, no one brings out the Genji. What is
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
comparison?
That's
Give
always a
us like.
little. I mean, you can only predict as much, right? But that's always that hurts. That hurts. Yeah. I think. Would you have liked to introduce more PTK model stuff for teams?
There's so many things that I would like to introduce, basically. Even with trade kills, I think that trade kills is something that should be a thing in Overwatch right now. Like, so a kill happens, right? Okay, so a kill happens and it's for the other team.
Mm-hmm.
Then you go on and track if there's someone that traded the kill, right, for your team.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we're talking about PTK and DPS tank support. You also need to talk about who are the star players again for your team. Like if your DPS players are the stars, and these DPS players are out of the equation for some game or for some reason, like they just get counted hard. This is where your supports need to step up. So eventually, it's up to the supports to play their part right, rather than the DPS players to play their own part right.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where I think Baroi was the one that first introduced these notions to me, because I asked him, for example, back in the day when we were talking about PTK, the first days that I talked to him about this stat, I asked him, like, for example, can you give me like PTKs for all players? And then because he made the PTK for all players, he just started to combine, per role,
Mm-hmm.
like supports, tanks, and DPS, and he saw that when the tanks, for example, are really really low, when the supports are really really low, and only the DPS side, it really means that your team going to go far away, because there's so many occasions where the DPS can be shut down by a very well organized
Mm-hmm.
team, with a proper dive that really has a better
Mm-hmm.
kill prioritization. That
Also,
yeah,
Diva.
it's up to your yeah, it's up to your DPS to get the kills then, but your supports have like been eliminated, and yeah, you can get kills as DPS, but in the long run on the map won't matter,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like we have seen it many times, I think, even in this season of Contenders, where you see a support like popping off, getting 3 kills, and then immediately you see the kill feed being lighted up by kills of supports of the enemy team, trade kills, and then they just reverse back the balance to their side because the supports are alive and they can heal.
Mm-hmm.
So you're like a DPS player, but with no sustainability, and you're going to get supports that have the self sustainability, and they also can sustain their side. So yeah, you can talk about many many things, I think, and I'm really not really angry, not really disappointed. I'm just really cautious about this stuff, because I was expecting, at least until this point, that the Blizzard has rolled out the API, so we can get the best information
Yeah.
on some levels to actually find the sweet spots to talk about these things. Right now we talk about things only from the kill feed, and these things are only 95% accurate.
Mm-hmm.
Replays mess up things, um, other stuff mess up things, like no register kills or stuff like that. So we have a picture, but it's not the picture we wanted to talk about right now. We would have a better picture, and I was hoping that Contenders would be that time, right? It's the tournament where the best teams right now
Mm-hmm.
compete. So, like Blizzard sanctions this tournament, they are the ones organizing it. Why, why, why do you keep us like waiting again?
I think
I
that
don't know.
has to be part of the, um, BlizzCon announcement. Hopefully, you know, maybe they will have something for us at this time. Um, I wouldn't get my hopes up though. Uh, maybe just for launch of Overwatch League. I don't know. It's very hard to see if, or to say if it would obviously be, you know, a dream to have, like, because believe it or not, like, Baroy doesn't actually enjoy scanning these games much, right? It's just such pleb work. It's basically data entry for, like, for a minimum wage, you know, cubicle pleb, and which he has to do in order to keep the database relevant. So that should be optimized as, or automated.
And there's another thing that Contenders really annoys me that they do, that they raise the VODs of the whole show, so they just keep the parts. They just, you know, replace the whole VOD, you know, of the 7 hours broadcast with just smaller VODs of each game. And one of the greatest features of Windows Lab right now is that you run the timeline, you find an interesting spot, like maybe an ultimate that went off and killed many people, or maybe a kill sequence that doesn't really make sense, you know, because someone died when he shouldn't have died or stuff like that. Then you can press it and go to the VOD and see exactly what happened from the in-game cameras and stuff like that. And we don't have right now because they raised the VODs, and eventually we just like a black string. And this is great tool for analysis, right? When you have the skill field arranged in the fights, you can scroll back and talk about, like, okay, this thing happened here, and talk it from a macro level. Like, you don't even go and check positionings, but you check, like, this skill here holds more significance than the other kill there. So I would expect to see things like that coming up in Overwatch League. I don't know if they're really into this stuff, if they have the proper crew. I think eventually they will get it right. This is definitely something that you need in every sport, in every sport, statistics, and statistics presented in a way that are visually engaging, that are, you know, bringing proper information and correct information to a viewer, than just stuff like that. But let me ask you, right? Let's forget these stats and all these things. Which is the player that really amazed you throughout season 1?
I mean, the easy answer would obviously either be Logics and Effect, but I feel like that's a cop-out. So I want someone that is... that probably convinced me when I didn't... I mean, even Carpe is easy.
Come on, think deeper. I mean, you're constantly tweeting at him on Twitter sometimes.
You mean Boink?
Nope, but he's on Boeing's team. Come on, man, cool man.
Cool. I mean, yeah, cool man. Yeah,
cool man.
Cool man had...
Did you remember that the body block, where basically he froze that transcendence, and then it was like, what happened here? Is this a bug? But he got just the body block.
He does it all the time.
The transcendence.
It happens so often. It's actually unreal how often he does it. And
his mind is working on so many levels while playing, right?
Yeah.
It like his diva play is insane, right?
And it's not like that his supports die often, or even his main tanks, and at the same time he frags, man. Like, he gets so many kills too, while still being fairly utility focused. So I don't know, Kumat is like, that's a tier 1 player, by the way. If you
I think so,
right?
too. Like, I mean, you know, Envious as a team as a whole is a tier 1, right?
Yes.
So you just bring a player in, it's going to play as tier 1 because he has this whole team playing around him, right? So they're out of the equation. They're the team where tier 1 team. Then you go and look FaZe Clan again. You have like players like Rokus, you have players like Shadowburn, and now they have the addition of Carpe, and for the first time they have proper staff, right? This season they had a proper staff that actually did the work, and I think that's why we see them. But when you look like below these two teams that are the top, and they have like those outstanding players, I think that the next in line is Efna GFE and Coolmat, for example. I don't know, like Boeing, he has great movement. Sometimes like question
his movement is just nuts. I think it's just
but sometimes he's like although he has the greatest movements, his positioning sometimes is questionable. Like he ends up in places where he shouldn't have been, like for some reason.
Because he wants to make that difference, yeah. I noticed that too, and sometimes it just goes bad, and he just has a bad game, and then other times he just, gets these impactful boops too because of his movement. But also another revelation on that team was Benny for the most part. Like, Benny,
don't get me
like
started.
in general. let me see if I have this.
He was just fragging out on Zenyatta many times, like it was great, and obviously Buds with his crazy diversity, like bringing out the Junkrat, like it was his most played hero all along. Like he was dominating even Team Envious on certain points, like outclassing time and all these things. So
okay, I guess if Coolman is definitely a good one, I would say Linksa, man. Like, okay, there is early beta players that were like super sick, right? And some of them have maintained, very few actually. Like Tivik is one of them. Shore4 should probably be in the same category. You know, these Western players that you saw in the very first weeks of beta tournaments. And Linksa was one, for instance, back in the day, he was one of the best Widowmakers in the world. And then he had a performance dip because he also was in Dignitas, and that didn't go that well. But that boy is just going ham this season. Like, he has one or two off teams, but it's just so nice to see that he finally found a team that actually, is good at all, and now he can shine again. And I hope, and that's another question mark for me, because, I mean, I saw him at Takeover 1, and yeah, that kebab around the corner is fucking garbage. It's like disgusting. But I don't know if you feel this ill just from the kebab, or if it's also nerves. I hope he worked on that. And we will see him performing offline too, because like Linkser is like one of the... I would almost say that he has to be mentioned strictly for his Contenders performance with Logix and Tivik. He was nuts. Some of this.
Yeah, a different kind of nuts, because he was playing Soldier, and then he was mostly close to the Vic than Logix, for example.
Yes, it's just in general sense.
This roster of Giganti made even Fraggy look like good in a sense.
It's strange, isn't it?
The master of feeding.
Yeah.
Before
I don't know. Like, also Snillo is obviously a revelation in many ways, right?
True. True. No one expected him to be this good on Tracer.
Yeah.
Like, and again, like, not easy Tracer play. For example, like no passive play or protecting your backlines when the enemy dive or going for the tanks. Like, in your face play. Like, go to the backlines, decimate those Zenyatas, decimate those Lucius. Yeah.
Yep.
But I think like Kulmat was my like, because of his plays on a hero that we hadn't seen work like that. Like, he was like the mirror, the mirror of World Cup, of the first World Cup, where you were just pushing a hero to the limits of his abilities, rather just honing specific areas or doing what everyone else does with this hero. So I find this like he's the one. He's the one.
Reddit has such a Mickey boner. I remember having a discussion where Coolmat could go, and I said it would be a sick storyline if he came back, because he was on the first Envious team, right? On the team with Tailspin was on that, Minstrel was on that, Coolmat was one, and yeah, basically, like, for him to rejoin Envious, and I don't care what Reddit plebs say, I was downvoted heavily for this, and I'm still bitter, he should replace Mickey in that situation. Mickey can, like, be the team mascot for all I care, but, I don't know, like, yes, if Kai says he values team team play a lot. One thing is obviously the communication. Like, Mickey is entertaining and all, but if he needs to explain in detail where someone is, or something, you know, some more complex, you know...
What do you mean this is not a bookstore? But it has books down.
Yeah. I mean, that, and... Yeah, I don't know, in general, like, I think Kaika also holds him in high regards. That's... I have heard nothing where Kumat is going, right? But I would hope that he would go to Envy, and then we would see... Maybe you could also, like, free up Mickey in some ways, too, so they could split the flex pool or something, right?
Yeah, I don't know, like, when you bring more players into a roster, then either one of them starts specializing in one hero, for example. So Mickey can be like the diva specialist, or Kulmat can be the diva specialist, and then you allow Mickey to go and ham with other heroes. So, for example, you have like Harry Hook, who's exceptional soldier, but he's playing Lucio. So you can have like Mickey like playing Widowmaker or some other hero we don't know that he's playing crazy well, and even like, for example, Orisa, like maybe he's better Orisa than Kulmat. I don't know, like. So you start like specializing, and then it's a different case than just replacing him with another player. You know, it's a different
I don't think you need to replace him. Yeah, I just say that.
Yeah,
I think Kumat is a better diva than Mickey. That's what I'm saying. All I'm saying.
Yep.
And I think that the recruitment of Siegel sadly makes this less likely, because he should be expected to also play some flex tanks.
I don't know what Siegel will play on this team. Like, I don't know who is going to go off of the roster just for Siegel to get in.
That's a hard one.
I don't know. Like, I don't know. Like, it for me it's all about mind games, right? Because you don't know which hero they're going to bring out. You don't know which composition. You don't know which roster, and then you can swap like mid game. And this is the most interesting thing for me. If you keep the 4-game set, and you know you don't need the 4th map, for example, right? You don't need to show any strats, because you sub in like a second, you know, the players on the bench, like 2 or 3 players from the bench. You just sub them in and let them wreak havoc with compositions that you just, you know, experimenting with. So that's all about, right? You know, that's and sometimes like you're stuck someplace, like for example the big is underperforming, you bring in Kulmat, for example, to unlock this team's compositions and stuff like that. So, and this was something we haven't seen in the West. We have seen it in Apex. There's this kind of possibilities as well. So a lot of things to talk today about. I think it won't stop even.
I think, okay, so here's a small prediction based on some behind the scene knowledge. I would think
leaks.
I would think that in these exhibition matches, the latest, possibly even in the Contenders finals, we will see Siegel on control maps in some fashion. I don't want to give too much away, but I'm fairly sure that they can afford probably to just mess around with their first opponent, and you know, the exhibition matches don't matter that much, and it's
best of 3 Ilios is the map. That's all I'm saying.
It's very obvious that Taimu isn't the sickest. By the way, that's another Mori, mate. Yes, Taimu does play you know, all those picks like Genji and like Pharah. That doesn't mean he plays them well. That doesn't mean like Siegel isn't filling a huge hole in that roster just because he played them. Like, mate, come on. Boy, like, at least include performance stats for Taimu then, and argue that Taimu is like already filling these holes because he's playing a Stella Genji or a Stella Pharah, right? Not happening. So
Mori is the guy. Mori is the guy.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. That's the guy.
Okay, I guess we're running at 1:10 right now.
You know, that's our reunion episode. So it should have been a bit
You know,
Heartfelt.
as one was parting gift, we've been on break for 4 weeks, right? And I was holding back on one leak, and that leak, yeah, I guess you will see. So, I mean, I prepared it before that, right? But now I've kind of forgot about it, and you know, not having been at home, basically, what happened was I came home again, and here is the old leak. I forgot to bring the leak with me on my holiday, and now it's sort of. If you ever wondered what an old leak looks like, this is basically what it is. So, episode 14, disgusting old leaks. I will probably throw this away after this. See you guys next time.